So, Earthlings, welcome along to this fifth in a series of vlog entries, which are related to some blog entries I did for VegFest Express about the people who founded the vegan social movement. We're up to the fifth one now, and this is a really interesting person, very important within the movement, and this is Kathleen Jannaway. Now, Kathleen features in this book here by Mark Gold, who used to be a bigwig in Animal Aid and also an author. And he's got a feature in there about Kathleen Jannaway, which is called Crank or Visionary, which is, kind of an interesting duality maybe. But she certainly had a good grasp of the situation with relation to our current civilization. For example, she says this: the present over-industrialized system degrades people to machine slaves and to program consumers of machine products, depriving them of their creativity and other essentials of spiritual growth. And the change will only come when we get the masses of people changing. The politicians will go on until they are frightened of losing the votes. The industrialists will go on until they won't sell their goods. It's the masses of people that we've got to get to. So they're good and radical values there, especially what speaks to me anyway is her appreciation of the limits of political campaigning. The idea that politicians are followers and not leaders, that kind of idea. So she was born in 1915 into a poor working class family, but also a radical family. Her father and her grandfather were both quite radical. In fact, her father used to be a speaker for what would become the British Labour Party and would give talks on peace and also the dignity of the working class. By the 1970s, Kathleen Jannaway was the General Secretary of the Vegan Society. Then she moved on in the 1980s to co-found the Movement for Compassionate Living. So, like Donald Watson, she and her husband Jack Jannaway were conscientious objectors during the war. She was very good actually at seeing the interlinks between justice issues. For example, she taught children with learning difficulties. She was a peace and freedom from hunger campaigner and also worked for the Gandhi Foundation. Then in 1964, and this is what led her to veganism, she saw a review of this famous book here, Animal Machines by Ruth Harrison, and that kind of book really shocked the nation, as I put in the blog entry, but it also shocked the Jannaways very much, and that led her to realize the plight, as it were, of dairy animals, and she said this: it was at this point that I realized that these calves were a surplus of the dairy industry and that the milk which nature intended for them was being fed to us. So, of course, even for vegans in the 21st century, this is still an issue, getting people to understand the issue of lactation, being a mammal, cow food, cow's milk, and all of that kind of thing. So for Jannaway then, it was quite a shock to learn that back in 1964, and it was the fact that she was able to put these issues together with her interests in peace and world hunger, for example, that led to her having a very well developed kind of vegan vision for the future, as we'll see in a while. In the 1970s, or by the 1970s, her house was really vegan headquarters, and that was situated in a town called Leatherhead, of all kind of ironic names for a place for the Vegan Society, but there you go. Also, at that time, virtually all the materials from the Vegan Society, or literature, was written by Kathleen or Jack Jannaway. So the environmental crisis was always a major theme in those days with Jannaway's influence. And Jannaway would claim that humanity was engaged in an all-out assault on the living systems of the planet, which just wasn't sustainable. In 1976, the Society was featured in a community-based TV show which was put on by the BBC. That was called Open Door, and Jannaway was featured in that film, showing off her green kind of manure system, if you like, and I guess that's the forerunner to what we now regard as veganic gardening and veganic agriculture. By the time we moved to Movement for Compassionate Living, Jannaway had evolved a really kind of radical culture, which was based on trees, a kind of tree-based culture, if you like. And she said that animal agriculture would be phased out and be replaced by forests, which would provide everything that humans needed. So essentially, the vision was of a global set of tree-based autonomous villages, and that would replace industrialized cities. So that's the radicalism of the vision there. I think I've said before that it sounds as though we're talking about primitivism, but it's not that. It's not kind of giving up anything. It's more to do with working out what would be sustainable. Jannaway's vision of a tree-based future was truly radical. She said it would prevent monocropping, it would prevent unemployment, and it would also stop the formation of deserts, a very important thing. There was even talk in some of the literature from Movement for Compassionate Living about the abolition of money, go back to a kind of barter system. So some of their vision is truly radical and revolutionary. Interestingly, in terms of activism, she said that anger does have its place, but anger should be directed at the act and not the actor, she believed. And she also thought that the key to bringing about a vegan future was education, and it was in that light that we need to act as teachers and educators, so we need to learn how to communicate with people. She described modern civilization as materialistic, as competitive, as violent, but more than anything it was not sustainable. And I think since those days, and she's talking about 1980s, 1990s here, since those words were written in those days, I think we've learned the truth of those statements, in particular now with what's now known as the environmental crisis. Jannaway states that fundamental changes in the values and practices in the dominant world system, which has created a situation in which millions of people and animals already suffer extreme deprivation and die prematurely, is essential. Jannaway argues that animal agriculture is based on the exploitation of highly sentient beings, which has created a second population explosion, and so therefore we're into that argument about how we would, as a planetary system, if you like, much rather produce feed for other animals than food for humans, who obviously have food security issues galore. She said that a vegan future would prevent the development of deserts, as I said, but also issues of erosion, pollution, and she even talked about global warming back in those days. One of the earliest people who probably did, in fact. I guess we would say that Jannaway was ultimately pretty optimistic about things, and that mirrors the position of the 1940s pioneers of the vegan movement too. They did really believe that we could, as it were, get ourselves out of a kind of global mess that we got ourselves into by becoming very violent, and that was echoed by Jannaway. In particular, she said this: "An era of truly abundant living will dawn in which humans, at peace with themselves, with each other and with all living creatures, will reach heights of creativity as yet unimagined." So she was very optimistic, as you see, and that does, as I said, fall in line with the views of the 1940s pioneers as well. We are talking about a vision of the future which human beings kind of pull themselves out of the mess, as I said, and it's something that we now are arguing in relation to things like Extinction Rebellion, that they're going to have a central core of veganism, in the same way as, going back to Watson and Leslie Cross, that all justice movements need to have veganism as a core central value, they argued. And I think we can still make that case now, and certainly it would be a case that Kathleen Jannaway would make. Okay, so I'll put the link below, of course, to the blog entry itself, which is much more detailed than this little rundown, and hope you read it, and I'll see you again. Bye for now.